Greetings and good morning on a Saturday morning, and I'm glad to bring you a list of the 5 best worst moments. When I say best worst, what I mean is these are moments that at the time upset people. But I'm going to grade them by how many people were upset by the things that happened. In other words, if it wasn't that upsetting, and this is only in the time that I've watched hockey, so this is stuff that's happened since 1982. So the Richard riots, anything else from before that, I'm not going to get into it because I don't know from experience or from seeing how media reported on it the 5 best worst things that have happened. Number 5. And don't get mad until I've explained it. The Thrashers moving to Winnipeg was bad news for the NHL. Okay. In that they had moved out of Winnipeg and they had anticipated great success in Phoenix/Arizona, which you can debate whether or not it's been a great success. But I'm going to get into that in a bit. And move back to Winnipeg. Now, it's a feel-good story in the States, but I do feel bad that there were some fans in Atlanta, and this was the second time that a team had left Atlanta, and it means that there will never again, in my opinion, there'll never again be a team in Atlanta. And sure, fans can debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Atlanta's a big center in terms of population, in terms of viewership, potential viewership, of course. And for the NHL, it had to be hard to give up on that market. And so that's why I'm saying best worst. Because at the time the Thrashers were thrown to Winnipeg, it was kind of one of those things where, like, one week they're in Atlanta, the next week they're in Winnipeg, and it was like it just suddenly happened. It felt that way anyways. Like, okay, so the Thrashers are out then? All right, Winnipeg's back. Sounds good. So it was rushed enough that there weren't Jets jerseys ready for the draft. And there wasn't a Winnipeg logo to put on the board. It was just sort of, hey, Jets are back. Hey guys, Jets are back. For number 4, yeah, I'll go with this because right now people still complain. And I'm going to defend it. People complain about the 90s expansion. I hear people saying the NHL at 30 teams is too big. Now we're going to 31. No, the NHL needs to contract. Stop expanding, contract. Okay, your teams would be better. If you went back to a 21-team league like we had in the 80s, you would have much more depth on the teams. You'd have guys playing in the American Hockey League who are good enough to be in the NHL. You'd have some really big names in the American Hockey League, actually. But the fact remains we're at 31 teams for a reason. There's enough markets for it. And when people complain and say, well, there's markets that are struggling, there were markets that were struggling in the 80s too. That's why teams kept moving. So, and Cleveland got absorbed by Minnesota, and then the Colorado Rockies were in Colorado for a few years after they were in Kansas City, and that was after they were in California, it doesn't matter. The point is, Kansas City was an expansion team, went to Colorado, which went to New Jersey. New Jersey was called a Mickey Mouse team by Wayne Gretzky. It was just, the 80s weren't any more stable and any more rich with teams that were making a ton of money than now. The NHL on the whole makes more money now because of 90s expansion, which expanded into the South. So number 3 on the list. I'm not gonna even try to make that work. So we lost a season in 2004-2005. 2004-2005 lockout. Whole season's gone. Was it worth it? Well, the game has got a lot better since then. Going into that lockout, in order to play in the NHL, you had to be some big, bruising, hulking player. The game had been slowed way down. Speed wasn't as important as it was after that lockout. Small guys could play again after that lockout. And I think it was a good thing for the NHL. Now, it shouldn't have taken as long as it did. And players fought, and they fought tooth and nail because, salary cap's going to kill us. Salary cap's been very good for players. It's been very good, not as much for the top tier players, but for the bottom tier guys. So the top tier guys get paid, and then the bottom tier guys get paid too because there's a lot of cap space. And I think that if we'd left it a free market, I don't think the top tier guys would be getting paid a lot more than they are, but I think the lower tier guys would. I think they'd be getting paid a lot less, actually, is what I'm saying. I think it's allowed not only parity in terms of teams, but I think it's allowed some parity in terms of who's getting paid what. Outside of rookies, but after their entry-level contracts, bridge deals have disappeared as well. So, and this could still come to a head in 2020, of course, but the 2004-2005 lockout, other than the fact it wiped out an entire year, the end result was a better game, more structure in terms of salary cap, and at least giving the public perception that there's parity. I know people have said, well, wait, the same teams have won the Cup 8 years out of 9. Right. But during the season, there is a belief there's parity that on any given night, any team can beat any other team. And you didn't have that in the 80s. You just didn't. But it didn't matter in the 80s because 16 out of 21 teams made the playoffs. So there wasn't really a big concern about missing the playoffs unless your team was really, really bad. Or you're in the Patrick division where you had 6 teams instead of 5, and one of the teams that missed the playoffs was probably going to be pretty darn good. That was the debate back then. All right, number 2. So the Nordiques moved to Denver. There was a lot of grassroots movements to keep the Nordiques in Quebec, just as there was to keep the Arizona Coyotes in Winnipeg. But in the end, I think Quebec fans saw the writing on the wall and knew there wasn't anything they could do to prevent the move to Denver. Ownership at the time was on board. The NHL was on board. And it always seemed to me like players were really cool with the decision. Now, the reason it becomes the best worst is the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup their first year in Denver. A big part of the reason they won it is they got Patrick Roy. There's no way in hell that the Montreal Canadiens trade Patrick Roy to the Quebec Nordiques. It would never have happened. I don't care how bad the ownership and management structure was in Montreal at the time. Patrick Roy going to the Nordiques, there's zero chance of that. So because he was in the other conference, because he wasn't in the province, they traded Patrick Roy to the Avalanche for a half-decent package. I thought Thibault was a better goaltender than a lot of people gave him credit for. The problem was he was being compared to Patrick frickin' Roy, and that's not fair. But life isn't fair for certain hockey players. Thibault had a solid career of his own, but again, it wasn't worth Patrick Roy. And then, at the end of that season, Patrick Roy was holding up a Stanley Cup. He ended up winning 2 in Denver. And Montreal fans rue the trade to this day because there's a perception that there's a curse on Montreal. That trade never happens. Not to the Avalanche. Definitely not to the Nordiques. If that move doesn't happen. So where might Patrick Roy have gone if it wasn't Colorado? Certainly that would be debatable. And you can just throw crazy random ideas out there if you want. But for me, we'll just stick to reality. Now, what started the idea for this video is the Gretzky trade to LA. When Wayne Gretzky was traded, this wasn't a hockey deal. This was Peter Pocklington's companies are losing money, and he needs to get some money. So part of the deal was that, and I'm pretty sure Bruce McNall was GM of the Kings when the trade was made, that McNall would pay $10 million to Pocklington that Pocklington would then throw into his failing businesses, along with whatever players they got back. So first-round draft picks, Marty Gelinas, and I believe Joe Murphy was in that deal as well. No, Joe Murphy came over from Detroit, I believe. Okay, yeah, it's Jimmy Carson. So to the Kings he traded with McSorley and Krushelnyski. That was just cruel of the Kings to have. Can you throw in Krushelnyski, a 20-goal scorer, big guy, can throw his body around, and throw in that Marty McSorley guy, the guy who's been patrolling for Gretzky for the last couple years. Throw him in too. We'll give you Jimmy Carson, Marty Gelinas, and $15 million in cash, and the Kings' first-round draft picks in 1989, which was later traded to New Jersey, and New Jersey drafted Miller, which is just insane. And then 91, they drafted Martin Roshinsky. In 93, they drafted Nick Stadstuhar. I don't think LA got. I think LA basically destroyed Edmonton in that trade, badly. But it was about that $15 million. So Gretzky cried at the time. He was very upset. But honestly, and I thought about this yesterday, how would that trade have played out if Gretzky had hindsight? Gretzky would have been sitting at that press conference with a smile on his face and saying, look, I'm really happy to have been in Edmonton, but I'm going to have a great time in LA. And I'm going to help revitalize things. There's going to be 2 expansion teams coming in. There's going to be one in San Jose. There's going to be one in Anaheim that's going to be named after a movie that Disney's going to make. And people would have been like, what? A Disney team in Anaheim. Gretzky's lost his marbles. It's no wonder they're trading him. So hindsight is 2020, and I think that trade was the best thing that happened for hockey in the States. And it was bad for Edmonton, of course. They won another Stanley Cup with Messier leading the charge in 90, but they weren't the same team. Nobody be the same team after that trade. It's not just we'll take Gretzky. It's we'll take Gretzky. Oh, and can you throw in McSorley? And we'll take Krushelnyski too. We'll throw in Jimmy Carson, Marty Gelinas, and a few first-rounders. Here's $15 million for your troubles. All right, let me know your best, worst moment in hockey. A moment that at the time looked bad, looked like it sucked, and then it turned out to be a good thing. One thing that occurred to me, and is an honorable mention, is the entirely awful incident with Clint Malarchuk, where he got the skate across his throat, led to hockey's goaltenders wearing throat guards. I do not understand why goalies don't all wear throat guards. It baffles me, because it is such a simple thing to have, and to make sure that your throat is covered, because goalies are very often on the ice and you're vulnerable, and skate blades are not made to come in contact with people like that. So let me know your best, worst moments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.